So, I've been recently looking through the Anarchist Archive and I stumbled across this nice little work called A Life Without Laws, an introduction to anarchist thought. After finishing the reading, I kind of have a couple of thoughts that I wanted to share regarding this piece of work and why I think it's a good introduction to anarchist thoughts and anarchist ideology in general. First things first, I think that the style of writing is much more resembling that of a story rather than some sort of an academic essay on what anarchism is all about. I think this works very well because it's easier to follow, it's easier to digest the ideas of anarchist thought, and it also provides like more historical examples through sort of historical comparison and historical analogies, which I think, at least for me, really helps digest the ideas far better, and also just sort of have them connect to something like outside of the text. I think throughout the text, I also felt this kind of feeling of a call to action far more than I did when reading something like the Communist Manifesto. I think that the language and the emotive expression of their words just resonated far more with me throughout the text, especially in the last couple of paragraphs where they say you want to join us, blah 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 blah. I'll put like the text on screen right now just to show what I'm talking about. I think that that kind of language and the way it's phrased is much more impactful than what the principles of communism offered me. At least that's just my sort of feeling that I got. Also, one of the last few things I'll mention about the style of writing, it really has a unique way of kind of combining the sort of specific jargon that anarchists use. Like for example, the Black Bloc. Let's take that for example. The way they explain the Black Bloc, they use sort of historical examples of how it was used, and this tactic was implemented, and sort of how it shaped anarchist sort of approach to capitalism. And the non-academic style of like explaining the jargon and terminology specific to anarchism, but through simple sort of illustrative language is just it just helps me grasp the ideas far better than what the communists wrote in their manifesto. Now, with all that being said, when it comes to anarchist ideas, I don't think I disagree with anything specifically. The only real big gripe that I have is with some of their tactics. For example, many of their tactics revolve around either destroying property or attacking symbols of capitalism or just, committing kind of acts of vandalism in a sense. And I think these sort of tactics, this sort of approach to sort of challenging the status quo that is like capitalism, it's not gonna yield a very favorable sort of opinion of people who are outside your ideology regarding some of the actions that the agents of, say, anarchism are willing to perform in order to sort of bring about this sort of better world. I think that sort of approach to creating change make is going to alienate a lot of people from your ideology. And I think in general, like most countries nowadays are kind of capitalistic to some extent. So an attack on private property is going to like land you in jail. And even the anarchists themselves sort of admit at one point and saying like, don't perform acts of vandalism with people you don't know and people you don't trust. And no matter what, like get in prison because far more can be achieved being free rather than like from behind bars. But that's about the only real thing that I disagree with them. Their ideas on like mutual aid or solidarity, I think, are very good, but I just kind of need to read more to understand how these ideas kind of work, especially in a sort of society where it seems like that kind of solidarity and mutual aid is going to be exploited by people who have more money than you. Another thing about this is kind of the idea of consent. I think they're going in the right direction with this one, but when they talk about like non-verbal consent cues, like certain people give their consent in non-verbal ways, I think that kind of creates a sort of situation where certain people can misinterpret non-verbal cues as giving consent when they're not really giving consent. They're just like sort of making nonverbal cues that appear as though they're giving consent. So I think that kind of subjective interpretation of consent might actually be detrimental, like not detrimental, but like one of the positions that people might say or like challenge anarchist principles on. So yeah, that's about it. Like aside from that, some of the observations that I noticed from reading this text is kind of like there seems to be some sort of schism or unfavorable sort of impression that the anarchists have of the communists, because throughout several parts of the text they kind of directly throw shade or sort of insult the communists by saying like, oh, especially like in this section where we talk about like the Spanish Civil War, they talk about how they were fighting against capitalism, fascist sort of ideologies, and once again they were betrayed by the communists, and then the country fell to fucking fascism. So yeah, this sort of infighting kind of is like, it's kind of entertaining to read because it shows that like even if there are two different groups of people or like different ideologies that agree on the same problem, they just disagree about the approaches needed to fix this problem, it can kind of create a situation where you have one group sort of aiming to eliminate the other group just because they sort of differ in their tactical approach of like solving the problem or just their methodology in general. So yeah, that's about all I have to say about this piece of work. I think it's really good. I think it's written very well. And yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to reading more about anarchism in general because this kind of got me very excited of reading it, and it was far more digestible than just like the principles of communism were for me. So yeah, that's about it. And yeah, see ya.